For my college screenwriting class, we were split into groups of 4 students each for a group project. The assignment was to select a myth or legend to base a 10 to 15 page screenplay on. My group thought it would be interesting to choose a cryptid for the project rather than a well-known historical myth or legend. Our teacher cleared us for the idea and we started brainstorming. Of course, we didn't want to do the most well-known cryptids like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot, so we started looking up some lesser-known ones. One of the ones that somebody pitched was a thing known as the knot deer, also known as the night deer in some cases. According to people's stories, it looked almost like a large deer, but something felt horribly off. Only when they drove away did they realize what was specifically wrong about it. Still, even before they understood exactly what was going on, every story mentioned the overwhelming sense of wrongness. Quoting someone else's personal account, "It was a deer in the way that a graveyard is a playground. You can treat it as such, I guess, but it won't feel the same." Lo and behold, after a bit of research, I found out it was located in North Carolina. Not only that, but it was just over an hour away from me. Just about every written or publicized story of the knot deer supposedly took place in Boone, North Carolina, and its surrounding areas. I informed the group that I discovered this, and being a spontaneous person, I also told them that I'd be driving out to the location that very night. I figured I probably wouldn't come across anything, even though I was legitimately curious, but I still wanted to go. At the very least, it was something interesting to do, right? And I'd be able to accurately describe the location and ambience of the area to the main screenwriter. I wasn't able to convince the other 3 members of my group to go with me. They all had their legitimate reasons they couldn't go, and since I made the decision to go so suddenly, I understood why none of them wanted to go with me on the trip. Still, I had nothing else to do that night, and I had been itching for some more travel ever since the entire pandemic thing started. I filled my roommate in on what I was doing and asked if he wanted to go with me. At first, he told me he would just consider it, but as I was getting ready to go on my investigation, he told me he decided to tag along. One of his main reasons being he felt like he had to go with me to keep me safe. I shrugged it off, not thinking much of what he said. After filling up my car with some extra gas and buying a couple of snacks for the road, I plugged Boone, North Carolina into my GPS and we headed out. My roommate and I were pretty relaxed for the majority of the ride there. We joked around, listened to all sorts of music through the radio and on the CD player, and had some of whatever snacks that we bought earlier. Eventually, though, we got close to Boone, and that's when we started to feel like something was off. It wasn't a feeling strong enough to make us want to turn around or anything like that, but it was just worth mentioning to each other, considering what it was that we were going out there to do. When we got into the city, it was just about what we had imagined. Gas stations, car dealerships, dollar stores, small cafes. All of them looked like they were closed at the time, with the time of travel and arrival in Boone being about 9-10 p.m. But all of them were well lit and unintimidating. My roommate told me we should probably head back around 9:30, and that he would let me know when that time came around. I agreed with him since I didn't want to spend too long searching for an experience. Needless to say though, we didn't come across anything by 9:30, and he decided to let us keep going for another half hour. The clock on my dash of my car had been broken for a while, and I couldn't look at my phone while I was driving, so I was totally reliant on him for the time. Had I known that we were going to be driving in the area past 9:30, I probably would have mentioned that fact and turned around sooner. Had I done that, I would have completely missed the experience we ended up having. I'm still unsure whether or not that would have been a good or bad thing. We ended up in Tennessee by 9:50. That's when things started to get bad. At this point, we rarely came across any other cars on the highway. We took the first exit we saw and ended up driving along more mountainous, forested roads. This means there were lots of tall, dark trees, almost no streetlights, and twisting roads that forced you to slow down. My roommate said he started to feel bad about the whole situation, and I agreed wholeheartedly. Still though, there was nowhere to turn around, so we just continued going straight since that was really the only option we had for the time being. A few different times, we got this serious sense of dread, but usually that feeling disappeared by the time we got onto the next section of road. There were a couple of times that both of us had started to tear up, not because we were sad or upset, but because something just felt so wrong, like we should not be there. Like this place was just evil or wrong, and we needed to get out of there as soon as we could. The feeling of dread was very particular too. It wasn't feeling bad in the sense of depression or anxiety, but the best way to describe it is a sense of wrongness, and it seemed to come in waves, not sticking around for a long time, but not going away entirely either. By this point, even my GPS had stopped working entirely. Both my roommate's phone and mine said they had full bars, but mine simply refused to connect to anything. Luckily though, his GPS still worked fine, so he plugged in the directions for home. It continued taking us down the road for a while longer. The area started to become much more forested as we went on, and the road started to twist and turn much more than it had before. Basically, we'd come across the exact area where you'd expect a monster to show up. And we started to feel really, really bad. I don't think I can express the feeling well enough with words, but it was the worst we'd felt so far. But we knew something wasn't right. We both felt like we weren't supposed to be there. We felt like we needed to get out of there. Since my roommate started getting truly spooked, that put me on edge even more, since he never gets scared of anything. There wasn't much we could do about it though. The GPS still wanted us to follow the road, so we both awaited its next directions, eager to get on the highway back home. The sense of dread still came though, and it went with every other segment of road that we crossed. Eventually, the GPS wanted us to turn around. My roommate told me, turn right on that road. I knew he meant turn right onto the road and follow it straight ahead, but for some reason, I figured we should just turn around and backtrack. I started slowing down, but we both started feeling seriously bad, like things were very wrong and something was about to happen bad. It was worse than we had felt the entire trip so far. My roommate said my eyes actually glazed over, like I was in a trance or something, and I just kept saying something along the lines of, I just need to turn around right here. I just need to turn around right here. Over and over. The more I said it, the quieter I got until it was almost a whisper. Keep in mind, I'm normally a very loud person, and had been loud the entire drive up to this point. But whatever it was that came over me, or whatever trance I was in, was seriously affecting my personality. I pulled off onto a gravel dip on the side of the road. Along that gravel dip was a thin chicken wire fence, shiny and silver. Back on the road behind us was a wall of dirt and rock. We were surrounded by tall, dark trees that blocked most of the night sky. Even with our headlights on, it was difficult to see very far ahead. Then he said, very forcefully, that we couldn't stop and we needed to keep going because he felt seriously bad. But I wasn't listening to him, and I don't even remember him saying that. I wasn't quite processing what he was saying, and for some reason, I was having difficulty hearing him at all. After he realized he wasn't getting through to me, he broke into a literal shout and told me we had to get out of there because we could not stop and we could not go back the way we came. It actually ended up with him using his road rage yell to snap me out of it and get me to speed down the road. The only word I can use to describe what I felt in that moment was absolute terror. Even as I was slowing down, I felt it get worse and worse until it was almost overwhelming. I only realized that after we'd gotten out of the area and back onto the highway. It was like that terror either possessed me or there was something that was out in those fields and those trees that came over me and put me in that kind of trance. As we passed through the area and started getting into the city again, that looming sense of dread started to fade away. By the time we got onto the main highway, we felt safe again. But in the moment that I pulled off onto that gravel dip of road where I had almost stopped the car entirely, that was the most terrifying experience that I've ever had in my life. I would bet my life savings that had we turned around, we would have seen something we never wanted to. Both of us admitted to tearing up as we drove off from that spot. I was much more shaken up than my roommate was though, and it took me a little while to fully process what had actually happened. I think it's safe to say that, even though I didn't explicitly see anything for myself, I found exactly what I was looking for. Is it possible that there's creatures out there that can cause that sense of dread and even make you go into a trance like I was in? It's scary to think about that kind of stuff because what if it put you in a trance and had you get out of the car or stop the car? Would I even be here telling you that story if I did stop the car completely?